Hello everybody, this is Dr. Aparna. Today we are going to read a poem called After Great Pain, a Formal Feeling Comes. This poem was written by Emily Dickinson, who was born on December 10th, 1830. She was born into a very rich family. She came from Massachusetts, Amherst. Her father was a leading lawyer and a socially very respectable man. She was educated in the Mount Holyoke Academy and she was known to be a recluse and a private person. Initially, she had a lot of friends when she was young, but as she grew, her friends started parting away. Many of them got married and she never had any touch with them. But then she started writing poetry when she was all alone. The most important thing that we must understand about Emily Dickinson is that she wrote her poems without really being in touch with the reality around her. I wouldn't say reality, but with the world around her, because she never really had friends whom she met on regular basis. She never really met anybody, and even if people came to speak to her, she spoke to them from behind the door. So this is the kind of life that she led. Many people thought that she was insane, but then she was a private person and she was a recluse in her own way. During her lifetime, not more than a dozen of her poems ever got published. But then she has written around 1775 poems and many letters. Now, these poems were hidden in her drawers. When she died, her younger sister Levina brought all these poems out. Of course, they were not understood because the way she writes her poems is totally different. One can say that her writing resembles the 17th century metaphysical poets. Then she uses a lot of dashes. Her punctuation is very erratic. She sometimes converts her nouns into verbs and so on and so forth. The best part about Emily Dickinson is, despite being away from the world, she has written poetry that is very close to her heart. Therefore, we can say that in a way she reveals herself through her poems. Most of her poems deal with immortality and death. She has also written a lot of poems on love and nature. But then initially when she writes about her poems on nature, she talks about nature as a friendly influence. But in her later poems, we see that this stance changes. Nature is something that works against man. As I said, she has written a lot of poems on death too, and also on immortality. The death of her father, her mother, her nephew, all these and her close friends left a very deep impact on her mind and her psyche. Probably that is what prompted her to write so many poems on death and pain. Today's poem is basically based on pain. It's called After Great Pain, a Formal Feeling Comes. After great pain, a formal feeling comes. The nerves sit ceremonious like tombs. The stiff heart questions, was it he that bore? And yesterday or centuries before, the feet mechanical go round a wooden way of ground or air or aught, regardless grown, a quartz contentment like a stone. This is the hour of lead, remembered if outlived, as freezing persons recollect the snow, first chill, then stupor, then the letting go. After Great Pain is written in iambic meter. The length of the line vary from dimeter to pentameter. The rhyme scheme is different for each stanza. Normally, Emily Dickinson's stanzas contain 4 lines. This poem has 3 stanzas. The first and the third stanza contain 3 lines, and the second stanza contains 4 lines. The rhyme scheme of the first stanza is AABB. The rhyme scheme of the second stanza is CDEFF. And the rhyme scheme of the third stanza is GHII. Now let us understand the poem. The poem is about pain. The poem is about trauma. The poem is about feeling bad. The poem is about sorrow. Now, pain that comes because of sorrow. We are not really discussing where the sorrow has come from or where the pain has come from. What is important is what happens when the pain is there. How does a human being feel? This is what the poem is trying to look into. Emily Dickinson traces numerous experiences from the terrible blow. This can be a blow because of some untoward incident that has happened, or the loss of somebody dear, or it can be a pain because of some misery that has been caused by people around. So pain here in this poem is not a physical pain, it is a mental pain, a pain that is felt by perhaps people all across the world. So this is where we can relate to this poem, because I am sure all of us have faced this kind of pain in our life. It is difficult to live without pain. All of us feel pain, all of us feel unhappiness, all of us undergo agony, all of us undergo the same trauma as human beings. But this particular poem traces pain, especially at the time of death. Let us try to understand it better, stanza by stanza. As I said, the poem is divided into 3 stanzas. All the 3 stanzas talk about death. They are associated with the ceremony. The first stanza talks about the formal service. The second stanza talks about the pallbearers treading. The third stanza talks about the final lowering of the body into the grave. Let us understand the first stanza clearly. What does the poetess say? After a great pain, a formal feeling comes. What do you understand by formal feeling? And what does she mean by after great pain? After great pain, we feel numb. There is a numbness in our heart. We do not feel anything. Everything is senseless. We do not have any sense. The pain is so excruciating that we do not think about anything else. So a formal feeling sets in. So this is the first part of the stanza. We are talking about a funeral ceremony. The next line she talks about nerves sit ceremoniously like tombs. Who are nerves? What are nerves here? Nerves are people who have come to attend this funeral ceremony. They sit in hushed silence. What does tomb reflect? A tomb reflects sobriety. It reflects death. It reflects funeral setting. Tomb has a very quiet appearance. Tomb is normally a place where dead are buried in. For example, the Taj Mahal is a big tomb. The symbol of tomb is a good example of a person who has really suffered a lot. The symbol of a tomb is an example of a person who has suffered a lot of pain. So after a lot of pain, a kind of numbness envelopes. And then the third line of the poem says, the stiff heart questions, was it he that bore? The heart is stiff. The heart is unable to take in any more pain. And then suddenly the heart questions, was it he that bore? The he in this line is Christ. The heart is questioning, was it Christ that really borne all the burdens of the people of mankind? Was he really crucified for all the wrongdoings of mankind? And then the heart tries to link its pain with the pain that was suffered by Christ. So this is a connection that the poetess is trying to make. The heart question, the heart that is stiff, the heart that is numb because it is unable to face any more pain. This heart questions, was it he, was it Christ that really bore it, or was it somebody else? In the fourth line, she again asked, was this yesterday or centuries before? Because when one is in pain, one loses a sense of time, one loses the sense of place. Always remember, when we are happy, happiness passes by fleetingly. It doesn't stay there for long. But then when we are in pain and trauma, we always wait for that pain and trauma to get over. So, spatially speaking, pain cannot be contained in a time or space. It seems to be unending. It seems to be ever-going process. So, here she compares, was it Christ who really bore the cross on him? Was it yesterday or was it centuries back? Because now the poetess can relate this pain to the pain that Christ bore. So in a way we are taken to Calvary. But then this reconciliation with religion doesn't last for long because the pain persists. Perhaps religion can console for a short while when she talks about Christ and when she talks about him bearing the pain, but then it cannot really last for long because the pain has really latched on. It has latched on to the body and it is unable to give up that pain. As I said, Emily Dickinson in some of her poems uses this pain to define the extremity of pain. For example, in the poem, Pain Expands Time, she later on says, pain also contracts time. What does this really mean? In other words, pain makes clock, pain makes calendar meaningless. This is exactly perhaps what Emily Dickinson was trying to tell in the first stanza also. Pain cannot be contained in time or calendar or place. This pain, when it is experienced, when it is felt, you forget the time and everything else around it. The second stanza, now let us try to understand, as I said, what the second stanza says. The second stanza talks about the feet mechanical go round a wooden way, off ground or air or aught, regardless grown, a quartz contentment like a stone. Now, the pain does not subside, it increases, it moves ahead, there is despair. The second stanza deepens this despair. It tells us more about the pain. The picture of the body is now a mechanical object. The body is no longer just feeling the pain, but it has become a mechanical object. A toy that first starts moving forward and later on it is suspended in the air. And finally, what happens to it? From walking, it goes to a helpless swinging and finally to a circular movement. The body is no longer like a human body. The body now starts behaving like a mechanical toy because that pain has made it numb. It does not really know what is happening to it. Then finally, this pain is equated to quartz. What is quartz? Quartz is a hard mineral which has a cold tactile quality. The pain finally makes the body like that. It has a cold tactile quality. But then she also talks about contentment. Why does she use this word contentment in this stanza? Because according to Emily Dickinson, once a person feels pain, his soul is elevated. There is a change. Pain makes us better. Pain elevates our soul. Pain makes us more humane. And this is exactly what she is trying to bring out in this stanza. That pain, there is a quartz contentment. Even though there is pain, the soul is elevated and goes beyond. And as I said, Emily Dickinson always had a keen observation. She always perhaps looked at the world closely than any other persons because she rarely moved out of her house. She never met people. And that is the reason why her senses were always more activated. And perhaps she wrote more about her experiences. There was something else which I wanted to tell. Her house in Amherst was close to the cemetery. So often she would see funeral processions moving in front of her house. And that laid a very big impact on her mind. And perhaps that is the reason why she writes so much on death, she writes so much on pain, and she hopes that there is something called immortality after death. And that is why she has always said that immortality has been her flood subject. The final stanza completes this crystallization process. The line, remembered if outlived, is particularly forceful. How does this stanza start? This is the hour of lead, remembered if outlived, as freezing persons recollect the snow, first chill, then stupor, then the letting go. Now, what is lead? Lead is a heavy material. Now, the hour is like a lead. What is hour? The time, the pain is like a lead on a human being, or the pain is like that. Person is unable to shrug off that pain. The pain is there in the body, the pain is there in the mind, the pain is there psychologically felt by the body like the lead, and it drags on. There is no end to that pain. So she starts giving an example stating that remembered if outlived. There are rarely any people who remember this pain because very rarely people outlive this pain. and if they do live through this pain, it is only then can they speak their experiences. So according to her, not many people really outlive this pain. It is very difficult, because very difficult for people to really come back and tell this is what they have experienced, because finally what does this pain lead to? According to her, it leads to death, and that is what she says. What kind of death is she talking about? What kind of death? She talks about a person who is freezing. What happens when a person is freezing? He is put in a temperature of say -20 or -25. What does that person feel? This pain is like that. The first thing, when the person is there freezing, what does he feel? The first thing he feels is chill. Chill that runs through the body, chill that gets into the body, gets into the nerves, hits at the bone. And what happens? Then there is stupor. That is, there is numbness all around. People cannot feel anything. And finally, there is a letting go. I can give you another good example. I'm sure most of you have seen the movie Titanic, because this is what is really coming to my mind as I'm speaking to all of you. For example, I'm sure you have seen the last scene of the movie Titanic. What happens to Jack when he's trying to rescue Rose? They fall into the Atlantic Ocean, and then there is a wooden plank where he asks Rose to take rest. And what happens to Jack? He's alive, but then how does he die? He dies because of the freezing cold water. This is exactly what she's trying to say. It is so freezing that it hits the body, it hits the muscle, it hits the bone, and then first there is chill, and then there is numbness, and finally the body lets go. What does the body let go of? The body lets go of the life inside it. So this is what happens to the person in the end. This is a very good example that she gives. I hope you can now relate it better when I speak about Titanic. Like that, she has written many poems on death. There is another poem on pain. This poem is called I Felt a Funeral in My Brain. She gives a rather disturbing portrayal of death. It's about a person who is dead, and he sees what is happening to him after his death. So this really has a great impact on the psyche of a person who's dying. It suggests death's dreadful isolation, how the body isolates itself from the entire world at the time of death. It is not just physical death, but it is also spiritual death that she is talking about in this poem. The poem describes the terrible struggle that the body faces when it is getting separated from the soul. So all through her poems that deal with death and pain, she is questioning death, she questions pain, and she says that actually pain elevates you. Pain elevates the soul. Pain makes you more human. Pain is good. It is not bad. So that is what she says in this poem too, that pain, after great pain, a formal feeling comes, and there is contentment. There definitely the soul is elevated. The poem deals with the various facets of a funeral ceremony. As I have said, the first stanza, as I have said, talks about the formal service. The second stanza talks about a body becoming just like a motionless object, and the third stanza, the way the body finally lets go of its life. Now let us try to understand this poem in its totality. The poem is definitely an artistic achievement by Emily Dickinson. As I said, she resembles a lot the 17th century metaphysical poets because she writes to the point, she writes precisely, she doesn't use many words. As I have been reading through the poem, I'm sure you have understood that poem doesn't really contain many words, but then it has a lot of hidden meaning to it, and that is her speciality. She brings out a lot of meaning from what little she has written, and she uses dashes as small pauses. And this is very typical of Emily Dickinson. Her writing style is totally different, and this writing style was later on appreciated, and as I said, now she is recognized as a major poet in America. The poem definitely is an artistic achievement, as I have already said before, because it talks about the death, it does not really talk about the cause of the pain. It does not really talk about what causes the death or what causes the pain. She is trying to analyze what the pain is and how it what happens when a body starts feeling pain. And the first stanza, she talks just about that. As I said, the poem is divided into 3 stanzas, and each stanza talks about different things and different stages of a death ceremony. The first talks about the formal ceremony, the second is about how the pallbearers are lowering the body into the grave, and the third is how the body finally lets go off. How does it leave its life? So overall, this poem talks about pain. And what is it that we learn? We learn that despite all the pain that the body feels, despite the pain that the body faces, despite all that pain that the body is receiving, there is a contentment, there is an elevation of soul, there is something that the soul learns, there is something that perhaps we all learn in the process. The poem structures an experience which is inevitable in life. All of us have undergone this experience. All of us have faced this pain. All of us know what pain is. And all of us have always felt that pain is a learning experience. I'm sure you all have undergone some kind of pain, some kind of trauma, some kind of angst in your life. Have you not realize that after this experience you have come out as better human beings, and your perspective, your perception of life has definitely changed a lot more. I hope you have enjoyed listening to this lesson as much as I have enjoyed teaching it to you.